My name is Sarah, and I am 18 years old. But my story began many years ago when I was only 7 years old. Back then, my life was quiet and simple. I lived in a small town with my mother. Our little house was old with wooden walls and a tiny garden full of flowers. Every morning, I woke up to the sound of birds singing. Every evening, I sat near our front door and watched the sun slowly disappear behind the trees. Even though my life seemed peaceful, there was one person missing: my father. When I was very young, I didn't understand why he wasn't with us. Whenever I asked about him, my mother would smile gently and say, "He's working far away. He's very busy, but he loves you." I believed every word because I wanted it to be true. As the years passed, I kept hoping he would come home. I went to school, played with my friends, and helped Mom with the housework. But deep inside my heart, one question never went away. When will my father come back? One warm afternoon, everything changed. I was standing outside our house when I saw children running toward their fathers after work. They laughed together, hugged each other, and walked home side by side. I watched them quietly. That evening, I looked at my mother and asked, "Mom, when will my father come home?" Mom stopped for a moment before answering. "Soon," she said with a gentle smile. That one word stayed in my heart. Soon. From that day on, I made it my daily routine. Every evening, I stood by the road and looked into the distance. I imagined my father walking toward me with a big smile. I imagined him calling my name, hugging me tightly, and telling me how much he had missed me. But every evening, the road stayed empty. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Still, I waited. Mom never stopped me. Sometimes she watched me from the window. She never said anything, but there was always a quiet sadness on her face. As I grew older, I noticed something strange. Whenever I talked about my father, Mom's eyes became soft, but they also filled with pain. I didn't understand why. I thought she missed him just as much as I did, so I kept waiting not only for myself, but also for her. I believed that when my father finally came home, Mom would smile again. At school, my classmates often talked about their fathers. Some said their dads were funny. Others said their dads were strict. I listened carefully to every story. I wondered what my own father was like. Was he kind? Was he brave? Did he ever think about me? In my imagination, he became a hero. I pictured him working hard somewhere far away, trying his best to return home. I dreamed that one day he would bring me gifts, tell me exciting stories, and never leave again. Those dreams filled me with hope, but they also made the waiting even more painful. Then one rainy evening, something happened that I will never forget. Heavy rain covered the streets and almost no one was outside. Even so, I stood beside the road with my little umbrella, watching every passing moment. My clothes were soaked, but I didn't move. A few minutes later, Mom came outside. She walked up to me and gently said, "Sarah, come inside. It's too cold." I shook my head. "What if Dad comes today?" I asked. Mom looked at me silently for a long time. Then she held my hand. "He won't come today," she whispered. Her voice sounded different. There was no hope in it, only sadness and exhaustion. For the first time, I felt a small fear growing inside my heart, but I refused to believe it. "No," I said. "He will come. You told me soon." Mom didn't answer. She simply looked at me with tearful eyes. And in that quiet moment, I realized she was carrying a sadness I was still too young to understand. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about my mother's words. "He won't come today." I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. I tried to comfort myself. Maybe not today, but tomorrow. Yes, maybe tomorrow. I held on to that hope because letting it go hurt too much. From that day, my waiting changed. It was no longer just a simple wish. It became a part of my heart. I didn't know it then, but that hope would stay with me for many years. Every day I promised myself the same thing. I will wait for my father. Time passed and the years went by. But I never stopped waiting. Every afternoon after school, I followed the same routine. I put my school bag in my room, changed my clothes, and walked to the road in front of our house. Then I stood there quietly, looking into the distance. I hoped that one day I would finally see my father walking toward me. At first, no one paid attention. But as I grew older, people started to notice. My classmates often asked me questions. "Why do you stand here every day? Who are you waiting for?" I always smiled and answered proudly, "I'm waiting for my father." I thought they would understand, but they didn't. Some children looked at me with surprise. Some stayed quiet and some laughed. One afternoon, a boy looked at me and said, "He's never coming back." His words hurt more than I could explain. I quickly answered, "You don't know that." But deep inside my heart, something changed. For the first time, a tiny crack appeared in my hope. That day, I didn't stay by the road for very long. I went back home earlier than usual. I didn't want anyone to see me waiting again. For the first time in my life, I felt embarrassed. It was a feeling I had never known before. When I got home, Mom noticed that I was unusually quiet. She looked at me with concern and asked, "Did something happen at school, Sarah?" I gently shook my head. No. But Mom knew I wasn't telling the truth. She sat beside me and softly said, "You can tell me anything." I looked into her eyes. For a moment, I wanted to ask the question that had been living inside my heart for years. Is my father really coming back? But I couldn't. I was afraid. Afraid that the answer would break my heart. So I stayed silent. The days kept passing. I still waited every evening, but now I waited differently. Instead of standing where everyone could see me, I stood quietly near the front gate. From there, I could still watch the road, but now I hid my hope from other people. At first, I didn't understand why I was doing it. Later, I realized the truth. I was trying to protect my heart. I didn't want anyone else's words to take away the little hope I still had. Then one evening, something unusual happened. I came home earlier than normal. The house was strangely quiet. "Mom," I called. There was no answer. I slowly walked through the house looking for her. Just then, I heard voices. They were coming from the kitchen. I quietly stopped outside the kitchen door. Mom was talking to someone on the phone. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the sadness in it. I can't tell her yet, she said. My heart suddenly started beating faster. Tell me what? I moved a little closer without making a sound. Then I heard her speak again. She still believes her father will come back. I felt my body grow cold. Mom took a deep breath. If she learns the truth now, it will break her heart. The truth? What truth? I stood there without moving. Every word felt heavier than the last. Then she said the sentence that changed my life forever. He's not coming back. Those words echoed inside my mind. He's not coming back. For a moment, I hoped I had heard her wrong, but I hadn't. I couldn't breathe. Everything around me suddenly felt strange. The walls, the house, even the air felt different. Slowly, I stepped away from the kitchen. I didn't want to hear anything else. Deep inside, I already knew what those words meant. My father was never coming home. The truth I had been running from was finally standing in front of me. Cold, clear, impossible to ignore. I walked to my room and sat quietly on my bed. My mind was full of questions. Why did he leave? Where was he now? Did he forget about us? Did he ever think about me? My eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't cry. I just sat there in silence, staring at the floor. For so many years, I had built a beautiful dream. A dream where my father would come home one day. A dream where our family would finally be together again. Now that dream was falling apart, and I didn't know how to save it. That evening, I didn't go to the road. For the first time in many years, I stayed inside the house. The next morning, I made a promise to myself. I won't wait anymore. But when evening came, my feet carried me to the front gate without thinking. I looked down the road and I waited. This time, everything felt different. Hope was still inside my heart, but now it was mixed with sadness, with doubt, and with the painful truth. Slowly, I understood something. Waiting was no longer just hope. It had become a habit. It had become part of my life. Even when I knew the truth, even when my heart was breaking, I still couldn't stop waiting. I stood there looking down the empty road, hoping for someone who might never return. After that day, something inside me changed. I still went to the gate every evening, but I wasn't the same little girl anymore. Before I waited with excitement, now I waited with questions. The road looked exactly the same, but it no longer felt full of hope. It only felt empty. I tried many times to forget Mom's words. He's not coming back. But they stayed in my mind every single day, again and again and again. Sometimes I told myself she was wrong. Maybe she didn't know the whole truth. Maybe she was only tired. Maybe she didn't mean what she said. But deep inside, I knew Mom would never say something like that unless it was true. Still, I wasn't ready to accept it. One quiet evening, I stood by the gate again. The sky was glowing orange as the sun slowly disappeared. One quiet evening, I stood by the gate again. The sky was glowing orange as the sun slowly disappeared. People walked past our house. Some were going home after work. Some were talking on their phones. Others were laughing with their families. Life around me kept moving forward, but I felt as if I was standing still. I looked far down the road. Once again, I imagined my father walking toward me. I imagined him smiling. I imagined him calling my name, just like I had dreamed so many times before. But this time, the picture in my mind didn't feel real anymore. It felt like an old dream that was slowly fading away. Tears filled my eyes. This time, I didn't hold them back. They quietly rolled down my face. I stood there alone and whispered, "Why? Why didn't you come back? Why didn't you try to find me? Why didn't you think about me?" One question after another filled my heart, but no answers ever came. That night, I finally found the courage to do something I had been afraid of for a long time. I walked into the living room. Mom was sitting quietly on the sofa. When she saw me, she gave me a gentle smile, but I could still see the sadness and tiredness in her eyes. "Mom," I said softly, my voice shaking. "I heard what you said on the phone." Her smile slowly disappeared. She looked down and stayed silent for a few seconds. Then she asked in a quiet voice, "How much did you hear, Sarah?" I took a deep breath. I heard enough. The room became completely silent. After a long moment, I finally asked the question that had been hurting my heart. "Is it true? Is Dad really never coming back?" My heart was beating so fast that I could hardly breathe. Mom closed her eyes for a moment. Then she slowly nodded. "Yes," she whispered. That one word broke something inside me. Tears filled my eyes. "Why?" I asked. "Why did he leave us?" Mom looked at me with tears in her own eyes. For the first time, I truly saw how much pain she had been carrying all these years. She took a slow breath before speaking. "Because he chose to leave." I looked at her in shock. "He chose to leave." She nodded. "Many years ago, he made his decision. He left our lives and never came back." Her voice was calm, but I could hear the pain behind every word. I looked down at the floor. "Didn't he love us?" I asked quietly. Mom gently shook her head. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "Maybe he loved us. Maybe he was simply not strong enough to stay." Her answer hurt, but it also felt honest. For years, I believed my father was far away. I believed he was trying to come home. I believed he missed me every single day. Now I had to face the truth. He didn't come back because he chose not to. That truth was painful. More painful than anything I had ever imagined. For the first time, I saw the truth clearly. There were no more dreams hiding it. No more false hope. I felt angry. I felt heartbroken. I felt empty. But more than anything else, I felt tired. Tired of waiting. Tired of hoping. Tired of believing in a dream that would never come true. That night, I stayed in my room. I didn't go to the road. I cried with all my heart. Every year of waiting, every dream, every unanswered question. It all came out through my tears. After a while, Mom quietly came into my room. She sat beside me and gently held my hand. She didn't try to explain anything. She didn't make promises. She simply stayed with me. For the first time, I didn't ask her to tell me that Dad would come back, because now I knew he wouldn't. The next evening, I walked to the front gate again. I looked down the road one last time. I stood there only for a few moments. Then I slowly turned around and walked back home. It was only a small step, but to me it meant everything. I wasn't waiting anymore, not because I had stopped caring, but because I had finally accepted the truth, and that truth changed my life. The day I turned away from that road was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new one. At first, everything felt strange. For so many years, waiting had been part of my daily life. It gave me a reason to stand by the road every evening. It gave me something to believe in. Without it, I felt lost. But little by little, I began to understand something important. Letting go is not the same as giving up. For the next few days, I stayed close to home. I spent more time with Mom. We talked more than we ever had before. Not just about daily life, but about our feelings. At first, those conversations were difficult. There was still pain between us. There were many things we had never said. But this time, we were finally trying to understand each other. One evening, I asked Mom a question I had never asked before. Why didn't you tell me the truth earlier? She looked at me with kind but tired eyes. Then she softly answered, because I wanted to protect you. You were only a little girl. I didn't want to take away your hope. I quietly thought about her words. For many years, I believed hope made me strong. Now I understood something even more important. Hope is beautiful, but when it is built on something that isn't true, it can also break your heart. I looked at Mom and gave her a small smile. I understand, I said softly. And for the first time, I truly meant those words. Days slowly turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Little by little, life started moving forward again. I returned to my normal routine, but I wasn't the same person anymore. Something inside me had changed. I was no longer the little girl who stood by the road every evening waiting for her father. I had become someone stronger, someone who had learned an important lesson about life. At school, I began paying more attention to my studies. I spent more time with my classmates. I made new friends, joined different activities, and slowly opened my heart to the world again. It wasn't easy at first. There were still days when I thought about my father. Sometimes I still felt the empty place he had left in my heart. But as time passed, the pain became smaller. The memories didn't disappear. They simply stopped hurting as much. One afternoon, I walked past the same road where I had waited for so many years. I stopped for a moment. I looked down that quiet road one last time. Everything looked exactly the same, but I was different. A small smile appeared on my face. Then I turned around and kept walking. In that simple moment, I realized something. I was finally moving forward. I wasn't forgetting my past. I was simply choosing not to live in it anymore. As I grew older, I started seeing my father in a different way. He was no longer the hero I had imagined as a little girl. But he was also more than just the man who left us. He was a human being, someone who made a choice. Maybe it was the wrong choice. Maybe it was a choice he later regretted, but it was still his decision. Thinking about him that way slowly took away my anger. I understood that holding on to anger would only keep me trapped in the past, and I didn't want to live there anymore. I wanted to build a better future. Now, when I look back at those years, I don't only remember the sadness. I also remember what they taught me. I remember the little girl who stood by the road every evening with hope in her heart. She believed with all her heart that one day her father would return. She was full of love, full of hope, and full of beautiful dreams. Even though her waiting ended with heartbreak, it also made her stronger. It taught her that life doesn't always give us the ending we wish for, but we can still choose how our story continues. Today, I carry those memories with me, not as a burden, but as a reminder of how far I have come. The little girl who spent years waiting by the road finally found the courage to walk away. And that was the day she truly began living her own life. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this emotional English story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Slow Speak English Stories.